All right, I support that enthusiastically. So could we have a roll call, please?
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark.
I will note that Director Clark has joined the meeting.
Oh, yes, he is on the phone. There he is. He's just joined. Okay. Director Penrose.
Yes.
I can't get my audio or video to work online. I'm still on the phone.
Okay, we can hear you, Director Clark. No problem.
All
Director
right.
Penrose. Director Penrose.
Yes.
Director Radek.
Yes.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Director Dye.
Yes. I will.
There's some terrible interference.
Yes. Can someone stop?
Everyone could please mute if you're not speaking. That would be best.
Oh, that was a phone, which was probably Matthew's phone. I muted it.
And I will hand this over to Director Reddick to run the remainder of the meeting with my thanks to everyone for.
We need to nominate the vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and all that stuff.
Shouldn't she do it?
Okay.
Run that or?
Yeah, probably. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I'm handing it over to you, Debbie.
Yeah, well, first I just want to say thank you to Barbara Dye for being an excellent chair, hands-on, enthusiastic, caring for staff, attention to detail. It's been really good. And I attribute a lot of our forward movement on our accounting practices to Barbara's oversight and encouragement. So thank you so much for that, Barbara. And thank you to our talented staff for keeping us, above water in the past year financially and in terms of our operations, especially during these, these biblical storms that we've been having. A lot of you have been working at very long hours and, to the detriment during the holiday season, to yourself and your families. So it's much appreciated. And I hope the public, appreciates, the role that you play. I know it's easy for people to just dismiss it, nothing's happening bad, like things backing up into their bathrooms and stuff. But they need to attend to, the importance of what it is we do. And we hope to, make that clear in the coming year through continued good communications. So I will now entertain nominations for the vice chair.
It should be someone from Montera.
Who was vice chair this year?
I was.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I think it's Montera's turn.
yes, it is Montera's turn.
I will nominate Catherine.
Second. Oops. Sorry, Debbie.
Fine. Are there any other nominations? Could I have a roll call, please?
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Penrose.
Yes.
Director Slater Carter. Director Dye.
Director Dye?
Yes.
Chair Radek.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, and then the next position is secretary.
Yes.
Do we have a motion for that? That would be Renata, I'm guessing.
I'd like to nominate Matthew Clark.
We have a second.
Second that.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Director Lohman.
Yep.
Director Penrose.
Yes.
Director Slater Carter.
You're still muted.
Muted. Director Slater Carter.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Director Dye.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Okay. Now can someone tell me what the secretary treasurer at SAM does?
Secretary.
I'll be happy to instruct you. And Barbara did an excellent job as secretary.
Okay. Chair Radek.
To sign resolutions. That's
Yes.
it. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Okay, so let me get a handle on the agenda here.
We need to elect a treasurer?
Treasurer, yeah,
Oh, we have another appointment.
yes.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for treasurer?
It was the same person last go round, although it doesn't have to be.
Right. I don't mind being treasurer if nobody else wants it. I enjoy doing that, but I sort of I was treasurer last year's and I think I can't succeed myself. So Rick, would you like to be treasurer?
No,
Matthew, do you mind being treasurer as well as secretary, being a secretary?
Is it not a single office, secretary treasurer, as listed in the agenda?
Is that
It used
okay,
to be.
Mr. Legal Counsel, Mr. Attorney?
Yes. No, that's permissible.
So are you good with that, Matthew?
Sure. What's the treasurer do?
Sign checks.
Or
I
not
have
necessarily.
I have never signed anything that allowed me to sign checks at SAM in all these years. So we'll have to get that done. Maybe the secretary can take care of that.
And that's you, to be clear.
And you don't have to be secretary treasurer to sign. I think you just have to be a board member and be signed up with the bank. So.
That's true, Barbara.
Yeah.
Any
And I've never done that.
directors from some that have done signature cards at the bank. So the treasurer doesn't have to sign checks.
But if, anybody raises any problems, that would be, okay, he's up to it, I think. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So we can conclude that item then? We're done with that. Okay. So we're now going to move to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. And so I need to see if there are any folks raising hands here.
I see Catherine has raised her hand.
Up here.
Yes, Catherine, go ahead. Catherine.
I just wanted to take a minute and thank the staff once again. When we get onto the, that's for an agenda item. Never mind. I'll do it during the agenda item. So, seeing none.
You're muted, Chair Ruddock.
I do not see any other hands raised. Catherine, could you lower your hand there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I guess we'll just move on. So the next item is number 3, the consent agenda. Is there anyone that would like to pull any items from the consent agenda?
I will move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any other comments? If not, we'll entertain a roll call.
Director Lohman,
yep,
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Aye.
Chair Ruddock.
Yes.
Excellent. Consent agenda.
Okay. So we're moving on to regular business. So the first order of business is item 4A, Board Operations Committee and Finance Committee as standing committees, set time and place for the meetings, and appoint directors. So that would be item 4A.
Yep. So there are only 2 standing committees, which is the Board Operations and Finance Committee. The Board Operations Committee meets on first Tuesday of every month at 9 a.m. The Finance Committee meets on third Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. So the present Board Operations Committee has Director Penrose, Director Clark, and Director Slater Carter. While the present Finance Committee has Director Ruddock, Director Slater Carter, and Director Dye. So I'd like to know
I
if
would
there's-
like to stay on the Operations Committee and would accept a nomination to be chair.
I would like to stay there as well, hearing no objections, and I will make that nomination.
I am willing to continue on the board ops committee too, and I will second that nomination.
Okay.
So I believe that's the chair's appointing authority. Am I correct on that?
Yes. And then typically the chair of the board would appoint committee chairs.
The chair of the board would appoint folks to these committees, yes. So I would like to, appoint Deborah Penrose as chair of the operations committee with members Catherine Slater-Carter and Matthew Clark. And do we need a second or a roll call on that, or?
It's it's really tradition what this agency traditionally does, but it's the prerogative of the chair of the board to make committee appointments, but you can have the board ratify them if that's the way that we typically do it here. The JPA agreement's not real clear on that.
Okay, so let's have a vote of the board to ratify then. Could we have a roll?
So moved.
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Chair Ruddock.
Yes.
Okay.
And so does the current time work for everybody?
We have been able to be very flexible on that. So, and I think we've managed to get things done. So I think that works.
Well, the issue is,
It hasn't worked very well for me. Mornings are not good for me generally, unless it's at 8 in the morning. And that's early for a lot of people.
well, the other issue is that it's a standing committee. So you need to pick a regular time, I think.
Right, I know. What about doing it in the afternoon, Catherine and Matthew?
I can do that. Later in the morning works better for me, but if we do it in the afternoon, let's do it very late in the afternoon.
That works. Matthew?
I'm fine with first Tuesdays, and I like that we have had meetings at different hours to meet people's schedules. How late in the afternoon are we talking about?
I'm talking about 4. These meetings, since that's with George is off at 5, so.
I think we can set it there, and then if we need to change the hour, we can do so.
That sounds good.
Except it's going to be a.
Yeah, so you set the time, and then you can always do it as a special. If you want to call it a special meeting, you cancel the regular one and do it as either that, or you could do it as an adjourned meeting to a different day. You can do it. There's a couple different ways to handle it.
All right, that's good. Okay, so do we need a vote on that, or is that just direction?
You should probably set a time, because that'll go in the minutes for the standing committee to meet for the rest of the year.
So could one of the committee members make a motion on the time?
Yeah, I move that we set the time at 4 p.m. on the first Tuesday of the month, is it?
Yes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Chair Ruddock.
Aye. Okay, so moving on to the Finance Committee.
I would be happy to serve as chair again, be a member of the committee.
I would be happy to make that nomination. You have done a spectacular job, Barbara.
Thank you.
And I would like to continue to sit on that committee. So basically the motion would be to reappoint the existing Finance Committee members to the Finance Committee. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, and can we add can we stay with the current meeting time, which is Thursdays at 11?
That works for me.
Yeah.
I like that.
The which Thursday?
Third Thursday.
The third Thursday at 11. So can we put that into the motion so we can do it all at once?
Sure.
I move all of that. unless somebody else did it first.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Director Dye, Chair Raddock.
Yes.
Good.
So my one question is, Rick, do you need an appointment to something?
Nope.
Since Rick is on LAFCO and CSDA and all that other outside stuff.
All right. So moving forward, we have item 4B, discuss member agency timeline for monitoring and source control efforts.
Yep. So this is in response to a email which we had received from Regional Water Quality Control Board in the month of December, requesting a timeline for the monitoring and source control efforts of the NDWSCP program, the non-domestic wastewater source control program. And they had specifically asked as to when the breweries and wineries will be enrolled by and their effluent characterization completed.
Among other things, they asked for other things as well.
Correct. They asked for other things, but one of the directors had asked for an update on this particular item, and therefore this item was brought to the agenda. And staff had consulted with the member agency managers and replied back to the regional board in December. And in short, the timeline is that MWSD would complete their application and inspection by the end of January, while BCSD and Half Moon Bay would be able to complete the enrollment of breweries and wineries and their effluent characterizations completed by mid-February 2022. That is the update which I wanted to pass it on to the board at the request of one of the directors. Any questions? Staff is here to answer.
Does anybody have any questions for staff on this item?
I don't have a question. I just have one. If nobody else has any comments, I just have one thing to contribute.
I do see that Greg Diegas has his hand raised as well.
Okay, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I apologize, I've missed a few meetings, but I brought up some months back a question about, in order to get a handle on this, were we going to install continuous monitoring equipment, which I was made aware of by some of my contacts in other public works agencies. And so I'm curious what we're doing. It's searching for a needle in a haystack if we're just sampling here and there everywhere. And I've seen it's ended up costing a lot of money. So I'm wondering what we're doing about the idea of installing continuous monitoring equipment. Has this been discussed? Have there been reactions to it and reasons why we're not doing it?
Yeah.
Do you have an answer to that?
Yes. At this moment, Greg, we are not contemplating any continuous sampling. We just got the data, what we've done at sampling at several locations, and moving forward after we issue the permits and we find out the effluent characterization, then we'll go ahead and think about that. But right now we're not moving forward with it.
It seems to me that it may be premature to consider such a thing. I mean, there is an expense involved in continuous monitoring and staffing to, monitor the monitoring. I think the most urgent thing we have is to get a program, up and running and, to establish the working relationships with Sam and the agencies. So I think it's a little premature to discuss that. If there were to be, issues and, issues of a scale and repetition that are problematic, we want to take a look at that. But I see that Barbara had her hand raised, so I'll take Barbara first, and then Catherine, and then Jeremy Jonas.
It's also my understanding that this kind of continuous monitoring does not work well for extremely low level flows, that it's very difficult to quantify. when it's a very small operation. So just something we could double check that. I don't have a great deal of authority behind what I'm saying, but that is my understanding and something that would have to be factored in as to whether it would make sense to move forward with that kind of program.
Catherine?
As I recall, there was a time in the past, and we should check this out with people with longer term memories than I, but the agencies were supposed to submit reports to Sam about the contents about what's in their effluent. And I think it would be useful to, if staff has the time, to see if that information isn't available. I think it's, I think, given the attention that we're getting from Water Quality Control Board, I agree. I think some of these monitors are probably pretty expensive, but maybe on a half year or quarterly basis, a third party, or Sam could take samples and send it to a third party lab. Something to think about and discuss as we're working towards the future. But just coming into the 21st century, but let's just explore it.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that through the permit process, when people, submit their applications, they have to identify, what the potential discharge constituents would be, so that if there are any aberrations in the future, that becomes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll take my hand down.
Noteworthy, but you got to know.
Lost our chair there, maybe.
Oh.
He froze.
It sounds like it, all right.
Well, I'll just add one comment, which is that I do think we have to get this resolved. I think we're closer to it, and hopefully we will get all this resolved very shortly and get some of these, the documentation that is needed completed in an appropriate way.
So I can speak to that. Should I wait for Chair Ruddock to come back?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, she may have lost her signal.
Why don't you,
well, I tell you what, should I step in as vice chair until she comes back?
That is your prerogative to do so.
There she is.
Oh, she's
here we are.
Okay, good.
She is back.
All right.
All right.
So Jeremy, you were next.
Okay, great. I was just going to say that, and I think you probably missed it, Chair Ruddock. Director Dye just mentioned that this does need to happen relatively quickly, and I think we all appreciate that. So the plan right now is to bring back a revised ordinance incorporating some of the comments, many of the comments that we received last month, for the board's approval, hopefully on the 24th. There was one of the agencies had some concerns about what they viewed as inconsistencies between the prior draft and the JPA agreement. And so some of the revisions that I made were efforts to try to address that comment while still keeping consistent with the guidelines previously given by the board in November. And so we'll see if I was successful in doing that. But the member agencies have that information. Their legal counsels also have that draft. And in fact, I had some good dialogue with the city's engineer just this evening and before the board meeting. And so I think we're having some good discussions, and those are going to continue with the understanding that we need to show progress to the regional board, and that we're going to have a plan that's implementable and that's going to be understandable by both the member agencies and SAM as to what roles and responsibilities are. So unless there's any questions for me, I think that's kind of an update where we stand.
So you're still having another, I heard that there was supposed to be a member agency meeting that had to be canceled or rescheduled, and that's about to happen again. So there will be another meeting of the member agency managers.
Yes, yes, Chair Radak, we would be planning on having the meeting either this week or late this week. And our intent is to bring it back to the board on the January 24th meeting for final acceptance, for final adoption of the ordinance. That's our intention.
Great, thank you. So any other comments or questions for staff? I don't see any raised hands.
Good. So no action is required, Chair. This report is for information only.
I will add, it is nice to see the progress that is being made, and I want to thank all the agencies for the hard work we've done on this.
I think Chair Ruddock might be frozen again.
It's cold out there.
It is.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next item then, which is the update on recent storm reports.
Okay. Well, she's back, I guess. I thought I saw her.
Yeah. So you can roll into it, Kishan, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm having internet failures.
Okay.
I just moved us on to the next item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a short presentation. Let me share my screen. Able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Very good. So this will be a quick presentation on the storm events. And I'd like to give you a feel of the storm. Shoot. I don't know what happened. I'd like to give you a feel of the storm.
Where is Seymour Dick?
Hapunde.
Where in Hapunde?
Down by
It's in Wave Crest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry. So behind the storm, we have our heroes, our staff. Commendable. They did an excellent job during the entire storm events. Entire staff, be it operations, collections, maintenance, or administration department. And they prepared very well for the storm, well in advance, made sure all maintenance and everything is taken care of, and they were prepared for the storm. And of course, during the storm, they spent hours round the clock, keeping awake throughout the night, watching all the flows, making sure that there are no overflows. And during all the three storms, there was absolutely no sewers spill anywhere, either in SAM plant or in the SAM assets that we own. like in the pump stations. And I'm proud of my staff that they did an excellent job. And this is in no particular order, but we have operations staff. We have Gabriel Aguilar, who's the lead operator, Keith Harvey, operator 1, George Long, who's the lead operator, David Partida, who's the operator grade 3. We have the collections crew, who has, here is Jose, Felipe, and Tony Young. And then we have the mechanics collections, that is TJ Hussain, Carlos, Angelo. And of course, we have the administration who oversee everything. Tim Costello, who's the supervisor of treatment field operations. We have George and Susie, who were there taking calls, and believe me, the phones never stopped ringing. It was continuously ringing during the storm events, and they were attending to all those, passing all the information to the crew. So this is the excellent crew that we have, and they watched everything, made sure that we have no spills. Yep. Thank you very much. And now let me just walk you through the analysis of the storm events. The agenda covers 3 main topics. That's the 3 major storms in late 2021. Talk to you about the background design capacity of the treatment plant and the 3 major storms that we had from October to December. And of course, the recommended measures as of now to better handle future storm events. So the background of it is way back, I think in the late 90s or the early 2000s, Corolla had done a design capacity analysis of the plant, and they came up with these numbers where they said that the average daily dry weather flow is 3.69 MGD. Average day maximum month flow is 5 MGD. Peak day wet weather flow is 9 MGD. And peak hourly wet weather flow is 15 MGD. I'm sure all of you might have several questions during my presentation and during the slide. If you could hold on to the questions till the end, that will be good, so that we don't have to go back and forth, and I can always bring up that particular slide whenever anybody has any questions. So this is the peak day wet weather flow, which is 9 MGD, and the peak hourly wet weather flow, which is 15 MGD. So let's go to the first storm event which occurred, which was from October 20th to 25th. We had a total rainfall of 11.14 inches at the treatment plant, cumulative from 20th to 25th. And the maximum rainfall recorded was about 4.94 inches on October 24th, 2021. The maximum influent flow recorded during this period was 9 MGD at 10:16 p.m. on October 24th, and all 8 influent pumps were in operation. The Portola pump station wet well, as we all call it, as a wet weather storage facility, which we expanded recently, reached a level of 17.9 feet, which is only 6 inches away from the spill elevation. That was pretty close. Although these graphs have been attached in your packet, I just want to stress the fact that this is the blue line is the plant Portola pump station flow rate, and the black one is the plant influent flow rate, where it has reached almost 9 MGD for a short amount of time. This is the Portola pump station wet well. You see the peak here, wherein it has reached almost 18.2 feet is the spill level. And here it is about 6 inches less than the spill level. 18.4 is the spill level, while the highest measured level is 17.9 feet. And this is the way it operates. Just to make it very clear, you have the wet well on the extreme left side, and as the wet well starts getting filled up, then it starts getting into the wet weather storage facility, which is the phase 1, and the phase 2, which is the expansion, which we did last year, and they start filling up simultaneously. So during the storm, the highest measured level was 17.9 feet, and you see this red line here, where the spill would have taken place at 18.4 feet. Going to the next storm event, which is December 12th to 16th, we recorded a total rainfall of about 6.66 inches at the plant. The maximum rainfall recorded was about 4.71 inches on December 13th. The maximum influent flow recorded was about 15 mgd for almost 1 hour, from 9:37 to about 10:30 on December 13th. Now, please note that the influent flow rate was likely to be higher than 15 mgd. It could be 16, it could be 17. The flow sensors were calibrated to measure a maximum of 15 mgd because that was the design basis when Corolla did the job. And they decided that the sensors should be calibrated for the maximum flow that the plant can handle. The wet weather storage facility reached a level of 17.2 feet on at 11:49 a.m. on December 13th. You see the influent flow rate here, which shows a 15 mgd constant for almost 1 hour on December 13th. So this is the Portola pump station wet level, where the spill level is 18.4 feet. And you see that it has reached almost 17.1 feet. The storm impacts on the treatment plant were huge. They were significant. There was flooding at the effluent building, the effluent entering into the headworks, entered into the headworks as a result of the flooding. And SAM actually used a portable pump to pump influent into the primary. And this was just in time to prevent any further damages. The chlorine contact basin was overwhelmed. The skimmers in the chlorine contact were completely submerged. And of course, there were PLC failures due to short circuit at the digester building. Some of you might have seen these pictures previously, but this is the flooding at the effluent building. The effluent wet well was overwhelmed, and the treated sewer came out of the effluent wet well and started coming out of the building. It came out of the building and went into the manhole, which is outside the effluent building. And from the manhole, it gets pushed to the influent wet well at the headworks. This is the portable pump, which we had at the headworks. And you see those large hoses, the ones which goes from the influent wet well and goes directly to the primary. And that's how the process actually follows path. In an actual sense, from the influent wet well at headworks, it goes straight to the primary by means of the pumps. But here we had to use, besides the existing influent pumps, we also had to use the portable pump. And if we had not used this portable pump, then the damage would have been catastrophic. The influent wet well would have overwhelmed, and all the sewer which would not be treated, or which would be a combination of treated and partially untreated, would have spilled out and possibly gone into mechanical building 1, which houses all the electrical. This is the chlorine contact basin, which is overwhelmed. You can actually not see the skimmer because the skimmer was totally submerged. Now, this is the last storm event which we had from December 22nd to 25th, where we had a total rainfall of about 3.05 inches at the plant. The maximum rainfall recorded was about 1.32 inches on December 23rd. The maximum influent recorded was 7.7 mgd at 11 a.m. on December 23rd. In this case, the precipitation was more intense in the north side compared to the south side. And therefore, the Walker tank, which was at Montara pump station, was very close to being overwhelmed. The level of the manhole, which is outside the Montara pump station, was about 4 feet away from overflowing. Staff was actually watching there, and they were actually monitoring the pumps, making sure that it is away from overflow. So this is the plant influent flow rate, which is black in color. Then the blue color is the Portola pump station flow rate.
And
yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. My apologies. Okay. I'll come back to it.
Okay. So this is the graph of the Walker tank. You see the red color. That's the Walker tank, which has actually reached its almost maximum, I would say. But there the sensors stopped functioning. That's why it's 18 feet constant. while we were actually monitoring the manhole. That's where it spills first from, and that was about 4 feet away from overflow. You see, the Portola Station wet well was pretty good. It was about 14 feet. It was still 4.2 feet away from any overflow. And as indicated, it was mainly coming from the north side. So this is the manhole outside of the Montara pump station. You can actually see the sewer there. And this was a picture taken when it was probably at its highest and was close to about 4 feet away from the rim. So the recommendations for future would be definitely to reduce any inflow and infiltration in all of the member agency systems. I know all the member agencies are doing a very good job, and they're trying to reduce it as best as possible, but still a lot needs to be done. Another suggestion is also to possibly install wet weather storage facility south of Sam's treatment plant, so that we don't get, the plant doesn't get overwhelmed. And another thought is also to expand the existing wet weather storage facility. We already have 400,000 gallons. It would be nice to have 600,000 gallons, as you've seen during the first storm, where the Portola pump station was just 6 feet from overwhelming. I do understand that not always we have such storms, but just in case we need to be prepared, then this is what we would like to suggest. And of course, last but not the least, hire an engineering firm to recommend changes in SAM's facility to adequately address wet weather related issues. Questions and comments? I leave the floor open for you guys.
Yeah, I saw that Barbara's hand was up first, and then Catherine, and then Joe. Barbara?
Yes, I know that Pilarcitos Creek was very close to a level that would also impact the plant. And I wondered if you could discuss that for a moment and whether some additional precautions are warranted to deal with the potential flooding of Pilarcitos Creek. I went there that day and it was very close to reaching the plant and flooding a lot of these sensitive facilities, including, I think, the electrical building. What is your thinking on that, and whether you see it as a significant potential problem?
Yes, you're right, Barbara. There was concern there. We were watching from the plant side, and of course, we had enough berms there, and it didn't come too much into the plant. There was still a little bit of puddle in the plant, but looking at it from the plant side, we were concerned that it might rise and come into the plant. But fortunately, it didn't come into the plant to that extent that it could cause any damage.
But that's definitely a potential. I mean, this doesn't seem to be the last big storm we're ever going to have these days. So maybe if you're going to have an engineering firm or someone look at this, that's also something that ought to be on your radar as something to, I mean, if just more sandbags and a berm to make sure that it doesn't, the water from that creek. And if you have successive storms and the ground is the water has seeped into every bit of the area, then additional storms don't have to be as big to raise the level of the creek, is my understanding. So I'm just suggesting that maybe in addition to these concerns is to think about the creek and how it could affect the property. Thanks.
Sure, definitely. That's a very good point, Barbara. We'll keep that in mind.
Catherine?
Thank you. I want to once again repeat what others on the board have said as to what an excellent job the whole staff team did. It sounds like well, let me rephrase that. It shows that there is so much dedication and so much excellence, and the teamwork awesome. And you guys all care so much about the public health of our community. It is kudos to the staff and to the management team for everything. This could have been a disaster, not as big as the disaster that happened in Seattle a couple of years ago where their entire system broke down, but this could have been just, particularly the first storm, disastrous. And so thank you to each and every one of you. You are all amazingly dedicated and just so good at what you do. I can't say anything better. And your coordination of efforts was also wonderful. I know some of you put in just incredibly long hours, often in the middle of the night. And again, thank you. Barbara, one of the problems, and I think it does deserve looking at, is how do we protect the plant from the creek overflows with that long driveway? I could just see the water coming in and around. But I know Half Moon Bay was working on, at one time, an estuary improvement for Pilarcitos Creek. And that might be part of what we need to look at. Remember that way back when, Debbie? I know we were talking about how to bring the creeks back to health and so on. So maybe there's some kind of grant we can look at that work, Half Moon Bay and Sam work together to improve the health of that entire creek. I also am curious, Keishan, in the difference between, on your graphs, between the Portola pump station and the total plant inflow, is that pretty much the flow then from the city of Half Moon Bay, including Miramar and Frenchman's Creek?
So the plant influent measures all the flow coming into the plant. That's actually the partial flume at the entry to the plant. And the flow that was indicated was the Portola pump station flow, the flow coming out from Portola pump station. And that is normally limited to the capacity of the pipeline and the pumps that are out there. So it's pretty much 3.3 MGD that comes from north. Everything else comes from the south.
Okay. And so I would like to see discussion of this. As I recall, Dan Childs was talking about a number in the tens of millions, 40 million, to bring the plant up to grade to handle these kinds of storms. And I think that's, this is all part of something Rick had gotten going with Half Moon Bay and with Granada, and that was looking at the plant needs for 20, 30 years, 40 years out. I think this shows the need for some very long-term planning and some short-term fixes. So I think this is going to be an exciting year.
Thank you, Greg.
You're muted, Greg.
I was going to say I have several questions if you can indulge me here. I know everybody's praising the SAM plant operators, and that's certainly justified, but I don't think you appreciate just how justified it is. I work with people in Pacifica on a number of issues, and they have had spills 3 times since the October 25th storms, the worst of which was 3 million gallons. The place is a stinking disaster. And there's all kinds of talk about grand juries and lawsuits and, recall elections and so forth. So We avoided that. And part of that is because we added that 200,000 gallons of wet weather storage in the Burnham Strip. So, congratulations for doing that. One of the questions is pretty routine, I hope, which is, are you going to recalibrate the flow sensors higher at the plant and at, I think you said Walker tank was pegged at 18 feet. Is that something we can do to get the accurate readings?
Yes, Greg, we are working on that. We are definitely going to recalibrate the plant influent flow meter to record something a little higher than 15 mgd. And of course, also the one at the Walker tank where we had issues when it came to close to high level. We are working on the calibration.
Is that a Montera? Is that a Montera acid or a SAM acid?
It is a SAM acid.
Okay. The danger to the plant if the flooding had not been averted, can you just say a little bit more about what would have gone wrong if those flows hadn't been diverted, had risen? Is there a danger of shorting out the operation of the whole plant or what?
Yeah, the operation would have come to a standstill. The influent would have overflown from the influent wet well. It would have overflown and come to the lowest point, which is the mechanical building 1. And the mechanical building 1 houses all the electricals. It's got all the electrical switchgear and everything. So once that building gets flooded, then it's anybody's guess what could happen. The electrical would have got shorted out. The plant would have got stopped functioning. Everything would have come to a standstill. No power.
Okay. The last questions relate to something that was discussed at the Montera meeting last week. Apparently, they had an overflow at what's called the Hart pump station when a pump failed. And so the related questions are, is SAM under contract to assist with those spills in Montera?
Yes, SAM is on a contract with all the 3 member agencies to take care of maintenance of their pipelines and cleaning of those pipelines and maintenance of their lift stations.
Well, but in this case, it was a very old pump that failed, and Montera is looking at spending, $1 million or more to do something to upgrade. If I understand it right, that station. The Montera directors can comment. But so this wasn't just cleaning; this was a result of a storm. And so my question, and the comment was made that normally they felt that a portable pump would have been deployed from SAM to vacuum out the excess flow and prevent the overflow. And so, I want to know if that's true. Is that normal course of business, and why SAM didn't avert that spill in Montera? Although I think I know what the answer is.
Okay, Greg. I don't want to comment too much on the Montera spill. I'm not authorized to comment on that. But this much I can tell you that once we saw that the lift station was getting overwhelmed, we had a Vector truck there, which was sucking out the sewer and then transporting it to another manhole far away from Daytart station. That's typically what we do during any storm event. So our Vector truck was in full operation and they were going back and forth, but it could not withstand all the incoming flows that were coming into the Daytart lift station.
I'm going to move
Okay,
on.
well,
I don't want to get
thanks.
into a big back and forth, Greg, with staff. So perhaps you could questions offline. I'd like to move forward in our discussion. Barbara.
Just a quick comment. I'm sure you all know this, but in terms of adding additional capacity to the wet weather storage in the Burnham Strip, it really would have to be accomplished in the next 2 years, because we really do expect to have construction of the Burnham Park on that property. Hopefully, I think actually 2 years is fairly reasonable considering the amount of time it's going to take to get the permits. We're working hard on it, but get the permits and then go out to bid for a contractor and so forth. So just remember that is not, once the park is in place, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to put additional wet weather storage in there. Just reminding everyone of this. I think you know this, but I just wanted to make sure we mention that tonight.
Are there any other questions from board members, directors? I'll go ahead and comment then. Yeah, I think this report has very serious implications, and staff took the time to develop some recommendations. And I think we have to, I think they're all good recommendations. Everybody should be looking at their I&I. But the one I think that needs to be moved forward as quickly as possible is the recommendation to, hiring an outside engineering to look at the sound plant. I do agree with those that we should be looking at the situation fairly broadly because we're going to have an issue with sea level rise, not initially from rising sea levels, static sea level rise, but from rising groundwater. And so the rising groundwater in combination with these atmospheric rivers, and climate models predict more and more of our rainfall falling via atmospheric rivers. So we're going to have less frequent but more intense storms producing more volumes of rainfall. And our drainage systems are just not up to snuff to handle these. So I think what we need to do is first hire a talented outside firm to help us develop a request for proposal. So not just for a firm to look at the situation, but I think we need to carefully craft a request for proposals that looks at some short-term fixes, but also the longer-term problem. And I think we want them, to look in terms of a shorter-term issue is the electrical system that's on the west side of the plant that is underground and is likely to be impacted by rising groundwater in combination with soil generation from these huge storms. So I'd like to have staff working with maybe a subcommittee of the board of directors to look at developing a request for qualifications. I don't know if we need to go to an RFP on developing the RFP for this bigger study. And I think the agency managers probably want to weigh in as well, because it is going to involve the larger watershed and what's going on, and Pillarcitos Creek. Certainly, I've been thinking that as far as Pillarcitos Creek is concerned, especially the estuary, and by the estuary I mean anything that is impacted by tidal action, probably up to the Main Street Bridge, I'm guessing. We're going to need, I think, flood storage basins. And I think possibly stone pine, the remaining acreage available for stone pine, possibly the empty parcel at the corner of 92 and 1. But our problem is big. It's got to be addressed holistically to the extent we can. So I think on an urgent basis, we need to develop an RFQ, get somebody to help us develop this RFP, and then move forward with that and engage the agency managers. I think this is crucial. This idea that we had 15 MGD, even that short period of time, is very frightening. And the wet weather storage in El Granada that came very close to spillover. I don't think we can wait. So I'd like to get board and staff feedback on that proposal. Deborah hasn't had a chance to weigh in yet, so I'll call on Deborah. You could unmute yourself.
Yes, I just wanted to say that if we're going to have this discussion, I think it might be wise of us to include Midcoastside County Water and Montara Water District in the conversation.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Like why CCWD?
Because they hold on to our clean water, it might be advantageous for them to be thinking in terms of recycling some of this atmospheric rivers that we're getting. It would be a very quick tank full to be looked at over the next year or so. So I'm thinking it's all water, whether it's used or whether it's clean. It's going to affect them, it's going to affect us, and we need a solution that is creative. And I'd like to see as many of the stakeholders that can add something to it to have some input. That's all.
Yeah, and I think, certainly, capturing this water, capturing not just wastewater, but capturing runoff. Yeah, and we're going to have to do it probably multiple ways, I'm guessing. So, point well taken. Catherine.
I think it would be useful for us to have discussions on decentralized treatment and storage facilities. I think that we need to be, as you said, Deborah, we need to be dealing with this in the short term. I agree with Keisha, and I think another, and you've heard me say this, another 200,000 gallon storage in El Granada. And even if it was dry, except once every few years, it would be that insurance or that life vest that could protect us. And the other is that I agree with the fact that we need to be looking long term. If we spent $30 million to fix the SAM plant, which is in a low position geographically, I don't think that would be a long-term fix given what can and probably will happen. And as I recall, one of the major expenses that Dan Child mentioned was moving the electrical system. But we're looking at a 10 or 15-year project at this point once we start talking about design and engineering and financing and all of that stuff. I would like to see us designing for that long term and for the benefit of each of the three agencies. And to Greg's comment, that's the problem with Pacifica. They put in a state-of-the-art plant at about the same time we were rehabilitating or increasing the capacities at the SAM plant. And they put in an entirely different technology. And they're a city that grew by neighborhood without any long-term planning for stormwater flows. And so Pacifica is a really good example of what multiple short-term planning efforts get you. I think that we would do well to be looking very seriously at what can be done, and groundwater recharge is always a good option. These quick storms don't give you much groundwater to recharge with, except in extreme flows. But there are ways that can be done, and as Deborah Ruddick was saying, if you put in these stormwater control basins, you're recharging the groundwater simultaneously. So those serve multiple purposes without needing a lot of technology. But I just think we need to be looking at a very long-term planning project, and I'd like to see it approached that way. Thank you.
I would like to respond to what you said about, Pacifica. And a lot of people have, taken stabs at doing it. I know, especially like in Orange County, looking at tertiary treatment, like treatment wetlands and things. The problem is locating those. I mean, potentially treatment wetlands can be overrun by these atmospheric rivers as well, right? I mean, you're talking about collecting water and, having wetland plants and all this stuff. Potentially treatment wetlands, depending on where they're located, could be a failure as well. Like the problem Pacifica is having. So, yeah, I mean, people are going to have to get, really creative here, especially in the coastal zone, I think. But Matthew.
Yes, following up on the excellent recommendations for moving forward by Chair Ruddock, does SAM not already have a prioritized list of what really needs to be done as soon as possible? I think we have been aware of the main electric, or the only electrical building being in the low spot at the plant for some time, and that has been a worry more than several times that it could be impacted. So are there things such as doing something about that situation that we could start like tomorrow? Or, do we have a prioritized list of where we should be going, and can we start to move on it?
Keishan, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, we can definitely look into that. Director Clark, as you know, we've gone through these 5-year CIPs and the 20-year CIPs several times in the past, but for some reason there was a lot of work to be done on the force mains, so those took higher priority than the other equipments and the plant-related stuff. But that we have addressed most of the force main or outside SAM plant issues, I think we'll be in a good position to address more plant-related stuff and bring it back in the CIP.
I'd like to respond, Matthew, real quick. One thing we could do is peel that piece off, peel off the piece of the electrical system, and, try to, get somebody working on that, on a plan for that, like right away. I mean, that makes sense to me. I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. So, the motion going forward might just make that a separate motion to move that forward. That's critical. And I don't know what sort of backup systems we have to take, in a safer place that would take care of that. But I think the electrical, certainly needs to be addressed soon. So, I think, Barbara, you were next.
I know that we had talked about some of the hazard mitigation funding that's available. It's my understanding that there's quite a bit of funding out there that's available for climate change impacts. And I know I had talked to Kishan about this a while ago, and I think we just should factor that in. I don't know how likely it is we get one, but it seems to me that this is exactly the kind of thing that some of this grant funding might be for. I realize that delays things, but let's also put that into the matrix as part of the discussion for all these projects, because they definitely are things that need to be done to help us deal with changes in the climate. So just wanted to throw that out there. I think that is a potential. And I agree about the electrical building. I think there are some other alternatives to lifting it. It's my understanding, but I'm no expert. I don't know about this. And I think I like the idea of bringing in quickly someone to do a look at what the highest priority actions are that we need to take, try to get that figured out, have a proposal for that, and then quickly then go to specific proposals to deal with specific issues. I think we do have to move forward quickly on this.
But I think the frame is, our wet weather problem. The frame is increasing numbers of atmospheric rivers with high volume, precipitation. So we're not just looking at any and all priorities. We're looking at priorities to forestall disasters related to, you know.
And that's exactly what I meant. If I wasn't clear about that, I completely agree with you.
Catherine?
I think Dan Child put together these lists. I think we paid him, as I recall, we paid him quite a bit of money to put together these lists. And I suggest that we pull those out and start with that. I think he went through and did a whole lot of surveys of the plant and past engineering and past records. So I think we could get a step forward rather than having to recreate those things.
You're muted, Rick. Chair Ruddock.
Rick, you haven't had your hand raised. Do you have anything you wanted to talk about here? Deborah? You're muted.
You're muted.
I just wanted to say that I agree with the point that Catherine made. We did put a lot of energy into coming up with lists of things that need to be done for the plant through Dan Child. So it's a good starting point. I don't know that he was considering atmospheric rivers so much when he did his study. Perhaps he was. I can't recall right now. But it's a good starting point at any rate for looking at what we ought to be dealing with. And also, I think that simultaneously dealing with the electrical problem would be a good move rather than waiting for a list to work with. Let's get to work on the electric at the same time that we're getting the list together. That's my thinking.
So what if we try to boil down some action items here? What if we directed staff to develop an RFQ or RFP dealing with the electrical system? You know, just get that going. I don't think there's any question that that needs to be done. So that might be, you know, one piece we do tonight. The other thing I would recommend, I think the point's well taken about looking at the lists. What I'd like to get board buy-in is, I'd like to establish a subcommittee of myself and Matthew Clark, and perhaps a person, this would be an ad hoc committee, somebody from Montera, to take a look at these lists and to bring forward a recommendation for an RFP for, you know, dealing with this bigger issue with the plans and potential alternatives. So I'm thinking of a motion to deal with electrical and a motion to establish this ad hoc subcommittee to, you know, review the previous recommendations and to discuss potential options for the board to consider moving forward to address, you know, the plant, overall plant needs. We know we're at the end of our useful life. We know there are these capital improvement plans, but I think some of this is more urgent, and I think we need to, you know, look at this again. So
I'd volunteer for that committee.
Okay. Matthew, would you be willing to join us on that committee?
I'm certainly willing, yes.
Okay. So I think we need a motion to proceed.
So moved.
So could you articulate the motion for us? First dealing with the electrical and then the formation of a subcommittee.
I move that we, are we looking for a consultant on the electrical?
Well, looking, you know, basically directing staff to prepare, you know, an RFQ for somebody to move forward, you know, some changes to our electrical system.
Okay.
Relocation or, you know, perhaps interim backups or whatever, but we need to address the location of the electrical system and future threats.
Yes, I move that we ask staff to put together an RFQ for a consultant to look at the issue of the electrical location and potential impacts to the electrical systems at the plant.
I'll second.
Let's take a roll call on that piece first.
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter. Director Slater Carter, you're muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Chair Radha,
Yes.
I move that we establish a, what is it? It's an ad hoc committee to review issues around threats to the, well, that's not right. Issues around impacts to the plant from.
Is it wet weather? Is it wet weather where you're trying to capture wet weather risks?
Well, I think we're going to need to look at a couple of things. So we want to probably frame this broadly. We need to look at, the wet weather issues. We need to look at, sea level rise and rising groundwater. But we're going to have to look. It's part of the mission of this previous committee. I don't think we framed our work as clearly as we might have before, looking at the future scenarios for sand. So it's actually kind of a broad thing, and we need to talk and narrow it down, I think. So it's looking at not just threats to the plant, but future scenarios for providing sewer service.
Would you call it emerging risks?
Wait, I thought we were looking right now for something that was really
Yes.
addressing potential climate impacts.
Well, I think emerging risks is a good description. Yeah, that would include all those things.
Looks like Kishan might have a comment. Chair Reddick.
Yeah, I would think that the ad hoc committee should also focus on a capital improvement program, because whatever we're going to come up with is going to be probably in the next 1 year and the next 5 years. So maybe finalize the 5-year CIP, the ad hoc committee, and then bring it back to the board for approval, and then we can go ahead with the RFP and other processes, because it's important that we have it in the CIP so that we can start budgeting it for it the next year and then move forward. So it's
looking at the list, looking at the capital improvement program.
Yep.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Barbara?
Sure. So an ad hoc committee to look at threats to the plant, future impacts of climate change, and capital improvement, general capital improvement needs for the plant, and to set some priorities.
Before we take get a second, Catherine,
I agree with you, Chair Reddick. I think we need to be looking at environmental risks. We have some major pipelines that cross major earthquake faults, and they weren't really paid much attention to when the plant was designed way back in the 70s, when this kind of awareness was beginning. We've got the risk to the intertie along Highway 1 in El Granada. So we've got the problems with the Princeton pump station and rising groundwater. These are all threats to the plant. There was a study 5-6 years ago about that showed all the salt water that's getting in at the Princeton pump station that affects the plant. So I think we need a global list of the risks and possible solutions.
Well, I think the first item in the motion was to address threats to the plant. Could add.
Okay, I heard that, but I just wanted to make sure it was there for all kinds of threats.
Yeah, I like the way Jeremy described it as emerging threats. I think that pretty much.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, modified to say emerging threats.
Is there a
we have some
second then?
existing threats? We have some existing.
I'll make the second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Director Loman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Chair Radek.
Yes. Okay, so I guess we need to, coordinate our calendars for a meeting for this group, and I'll work with Keishan on that.
Perfect.
Okay, so moving along. So I guess item 5, monthly managers report.
Yep. Anybody has any questions? Staff is here to answer them.
Catherine, your hand is still up. Do you have a?
Oh, I'm sorry. I need an automatic hand down.
All hands on deck.
And if you're not talking, please mute yourself. All right, attorney's report.
I have nothing to report, but we probably should have just a brief closed session this evening.
Okay. Let's see. Rector reports. If nobody else has one, I'll just mention that the governor released his budget today. And there is $37 billion proposed in the budget for climate resilience.
There you go.
And that includes a whole range of things. You know, it's decarbonization, it's wildfires, it's natural resource restoration. It's all kinds of. The surplus is around 47, and 37 of that is going to climate resilience. So it's a really big deal. And so it hasn't been broken down into line items yet, but I'm thinking that we want to pay particular attention to the budget for opportunities for SAM. Whether it's for infrastructure or planning, whatever. Looking at recycled water. Every cabinet agency speaking today in this webinar that I listened in, has a huge chunk of money. And there's lots of intersectionality for, what we do in this money. So, and I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of implementing legislation around that budget, not just budget trailer bills, but other kinds of legislation. So hopefully, Jeremy, from his point of view, will be, along with CSDA, taking a look at legislation that might impact us in a favorable way in both budget and policy bills. But it's going to be an important year to pay attention to the budget and, get a share for ourselves.
Yes.
Barbara, I see you have your hand raised.
I was wondering if Sam should consider bringing a consultant on board to help with grant funding. In the past, I've had, when I've been looking for state grant funding, I had some lobbyists who were, I was paying by the month, not very much, to help looking out for things and positioning my nonprofit well to get funding. And it seems to me that Sam is really in a very good position to get funding for some of these items, but it might be helpful to have, I know we have you, Debbie, who's an expert in a lot of this, but just something I don't know that we need to answer this tonight, but I think it's something we should think about, whether we should find somebody who could be really helping us look in the right places and put things together in a timely manner so that we are being considered for some of this immense amount of funding that's out there right now.
Yeah, one thing I think that Keishan did last year was I think he joined the Water Bond Coalition.
Yes.
Which is a group of, across California, a lot of them in the coastal zone, on wastewater and water issues, integrated, regional planning and stuff like that. And Joe Kay is the lobbyist for them. So, I mean, that's one approach, and we certainly want to be part of that group and get those emails from Joe about what's going on.
He was
But
my
yeah.
he was my consultant for 2 years. So yeah. I can
And-
say
and-
he got his $15 million. So
Yeah. So he's, among the best,
yeah.
if not, and then Townsend Public Affairs, which is our lobbyist, they also have a grant writing. So they write grants for us too. So Townsend, might be somebody, we look at, but I see Jeremy has his hand raised too. So he probably has some ideas.
Yeah, just real briefly, Chair Ruddick. I've got a couple of other smaller agencies that have kind of struggled with the same issue because there is a lot of money floating around both in Sacramento and in DC. But I think there's still a lot of sorting as to where's it going to go, how's it going to be implemented. And a lot of decisions haven't been made yet. So it may be in the near future, there may be an opportunity, but I don't know that we're there yet. I would say one thing that would be, at least what I'd recommend is, this agency is already a member of CASA. CASA has lobbyists in DC and in Sacramento who are very good. And it might be just a good idea for Kishan, and I can participate, and Chair Ruddick, if you want to spend some time with their governmental affairs director and say, hey, what are the opportunities that you see on the horizon? What are the windows that may be opening that we may want to take advantage of? And then use that as a screening tool. Once we've kind of done the screening, then we come back to the board and say, okay, here's an opportunity. We may want to pursue a lobbyist to go after this specific opportunity. And that way we can kind of narrow down what programs we're going after.
I think that's a great idea. I would just say one thing, and that is, I think it's important to not wait on letting the feds or the state identify what the categories are going to be. If we can influence the selection categories, I think we want to do it, right? So,
Sure.
I think active engagement with CASA is really important. So I think we should do that for sure. But I think we want to hold Barbara's idea in mind too. They're probably, because at some point everybody's going to rush for the gate, right? So we want to be ready. So we don't want to hold up too long, making the decision like, do we want somebody who's just working for us? So, Matthew?
I think it's an excellent idea to hire a firm or some firms, and let's not forget about that federal money. After all, we have federally protected ocean right here at our doorstep. And I think that should give us some kind of in to get some funding to help protect it.
Absolutely. And we should be talking to Congresswoman Spear and Congresswoman Eshu's offices. I know that Congresswoman Spear, as a prelude to her retirement, is spending, some more time in the districts checking things out. So, we might, try to schedule, appointments with our Congress people, since we're going to have two now, basically. Oh no, actually, Congresswoman Eshu, starting in 2024. So Jackie Spear now, but Congresswoman Eshu, once the districting, is established, because we're all going to be with Pacifica in this giant San Jose district. So get Jackie Spear out here to see the plant for sure. Okay. Matthew, Jeremy, did you have anything else? You're muted.
Only that I need to remember to put my hand down. That's it.
Okay. Catherine.
I think we should also be talking to the contenders for Jackie's seat. So that's Kevin Mullen is one of them, and David from the Board of Supervisors is the other one that I know of. There may be others, but they're the early I got a note from Kevin Mullen that Jackie has endorsed him.
There's Emily Beach too, who's very good. You know, she's on the Burlingame City Council.
Right. So we should be keeping all of these folks informed.
Yeah, you know, especially, you know, about, you know, starting with the electrical, you know. I think Keisha and I cornered Don Horsley at the city's Council of Cities dinner back in August and talked about that, but I don't think we've had him out to look at it. He's now the board president, Board of Supervisors president. So if we haven't gotten Don Horsley out here, then we need to do that, I think. Okay, so topics for future agenda board consideration. Anybody?
I think we've done a lot.
Okay, so I think we can adjourn to closed session at this point.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being present.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Yes.